Hey everyone, I'm going to share with you a quick darkroom tip here, and it has to do with consistency in your paper development. Now, one of the things that I've found is that you can be pretty off with development and you might not notice it when it comes to paper. I do want to say the first thing that'll suffer if you don't develop long enough, or if your developer starts exhausting over time, you'll start losing a little bit of highlight detail. So you have to pay attention to that. But one of the main reasons that I like to keep my development consistent is not so much for development as it is for when I'm toning, specifically with selenium or direct toners. So a lot of times you won't notice the tone difference in development variances. If papers are developed to a lesser extent, they will definitely tone in selenium differently. So I've had inconsistent results, and since I've kind of tightened up on my development consistency for the paper, I've had much more reliable toning. So this might be very valuable to some of you, and it's actually definitely something that everybody should be thinking about and just good practice to get into. So I wanted to share just kind of how I keep my development temperatures consistent. In my little darkroom here, it is, especially in winter, I do have a little space heater, but I don't like to just leave it running because the thermostat on it, one time I came in here and it was like 90 some degrees, and I was really not happy because I had a bunch of photo paper in here, and I just don't like to leave it. It's, you know, it's a space heater. I don't like to just leave it running, but I will kick it on when I'm in here to get it up to temp. But I guess what I'm trying to say is the temperature in here in the middle of winter is usually like 60, 65 degrees. My thermometer right here says it's at 58.7. So I do have mains coming off the house, but I have filters on them, and it doesn't get the best heat. What I do to keep my developer temperature up, and depending on the developer, with the Ansco 130, I like to develop it at around 73 degrees. But what I use is this food tray warmer, and now it is a rather dirty one. And I just want to state here first that I'm not an electrician, and you have to be very careful with electrical stuff around water. I keep this side, as my wet hose is over here, I keep this side dry for the most part. I don't think I've ever used this faucet, at least not for the last 5 years. I've not used that. So I try to keep this very dry over here. I do have this on a GFI. Yeah, GFI. It's covered. In hindsight, if I would have known where I have this, I would have put that up here when I had this all built, but I didn't. So anyway, this is what you call just a regular food tray warmer off of Amazon, and in and by itself, it will keep your developer warm, but the control on it is really crude. It will just go really, really hot, and you'll start like heating up your temp. You don't have a lot of control over it. That's what I'm trying to say. So what I have this plugged into is what is called a Variac, I think. Yeah. It's essentially a voltage regulator, which gives me very fine control of the temperature of the food warmer. So I can keep this temperature within like 1 degree very easily. And I just need to make very small adjustments to this top. So that is basically how I've kept my developer consistent, the temperature consistent, even in the very cold winter months here. Now, I will say that this developer tray is rather warped. That's not from using this at like 70 degrees. That's from heating lift developer and keeping it like at over 100 degrees. It did kind of melt the tray here and stuff at very high temperatures. But for general use, you're not going to do that. And now when I use very high temperatures, I'll put towels down, and I have ways, to kind of mitigate the damage to my trays. But it does work really good for keeping things very hot too. I have seen other photographers reference using like piglet warmers and different things like that, and I think that would work fine too. This has worked great for me, and because it's made for like keeping food warm, I think it works a little bit better, and it will hold an 11. This single one will hold an 11 by 14 just fine. It will work with a 16 by 20, and I do plan on getting another one and running them congruently for even bigger trays. Then to monitor my temperature, I have this little temperature gauge here, and it's got a little waterproof probe. And this temperature gauge happens to fit perfectly. I had these were for like running cables on desks, and they have little adhesive backs, and it works perfectly in this tray. Like I stuck it in there, and this goes in here, and then that you know, when it's got chemicals in it, it monitors the temperatures and I can see exactly what it is. All this stuff I got off Amazon. I'll link it in the description below. None of it was super expensive, especially when you compare it to, say, an actual photo tray warmer. Like, those things get kind of pricey. But the thermometer is extremely accurate. I was really surprised. It was spot on with the one that I used to develop film. So I was pleasantly surprised. And that, like I said, that allows me to monitor it right here. I can put this in Celsius or Fahrenheit. I have it switched in Fahrenheit right now. So that is how I keep my developer to temp. Now in the summer, I have an air conditioner in here that I'll turn on, and I don't have a way to really, you know, if it's 90 degrees in here, I don't have a way to cool them down. That's never been an issue for me because, like I said, I have a air conditioner that I can, a small one, plus I am on the house. So you know, if I'm in here for a long time and I don't turn that air conditioner on, it'll get up to 80 degrees, but it's never been a problem for me. So what I'm trying to say is I don't have a solution for y'all that live in like super hot tropical climates, other than maybe an ice bath or something like that. That brings me to my next point. To keep developer consistent, what you want to do is have a development time for full development. And then you want to use what's called Factorial development. Now, one of the reasons I love Ansco 130 is because it just develops forever. It's like it doesn't exhaust. So I don't have to worry about this as much because I'm not one to like to have to pay attention to these other details. However, I do. And what Factorial development is like I said before, especially if you're using small amounts of developer, the more prints you run through and the more test prints you have to do, it's going to exhaust your development. So if you just stay at 2 minutes, even at the same temperature, or if the temperature is dropping, it can compound on this. You're going to start losing a little bit of that end development, and you could start losing highlight detail. One other thing, I want to say that this is going to be more pronounced on papers that don't have developers incorporate or developing agents incorporated into the emulsion. So most resin coated papers and most fiber-based papers these days do, so it's going to combat that, but it still can be an issue and something that I really think you should be aware of, especially the more advanced you get in printing. I love printing with Ilford warm tone, and it does lithe, so I don't think there are developing agents in it. So if you use papers like that, it's going to be more of an issue. But back to what I was talking about. So Factorial development is basically you monitor the developer as you go. So like, say for instance, I use Ansco 130 1:1. I try and keep it at 73 degrees, and it does a great job with the system that I have. And I develop my paper for 2 minutes. So to do Factorial development, what you do is when you first put the paper in the developer, as soon as you see a tone emerge, you note the time. So if that was 20 seconds when I'm developing one of these prints, then you take the 2 minutes, which is 120 seconds, and divide it by the 20. That gives you 5. That's your factor. So over time, if I start developing and I notice that this is up at 30, then I'm gonna multiply that 30 seconds by 5 and give it that extra development. So what's 5 times 30? Hold on. It's seriously this bad, guys. My math. 5 times 30 equals divided by 60. So you're gonna give it, really, I can't believe I couldn't do that. So you're gonna give it 2.5 minutes. And so on and so forth. And that's going to compensate for the developer exhaustion or variances in temperature. So if you're in a really hot climate and your developer's heating up, you notice it's getting to 15 seconds. I'm not going to do the math on this one. And your developer starts emerging, or your print, the first tones, and you want to look at the same spot. The first tones start emerging at 15 seconds. Then you want to multiply that times that factor of 5 or whatever it is, and develop for that amount of time. So that's what's called Factorial development. And you should be doing this regardless, but keeping your developer at a consistent temperature. For a long time, I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to deal with it. And my prints looked pretty consistent, but like I said, it did mess with my toning, and I finally nailed down what was going on. Because sometimes I would tone and it would just tone like right away, or it would tone, my toning in selenium in particular with certain papers was kind of all over the place. And this has really helped kind of standardize that. So if you want, like I said, this developer is very, very consistent. It takes forever for this stuff to exhaust. I do have a link to my favorite formula cookbook down in the description below. So if that's something you want to do and you want to start mixing your own, check that out. Otherwise, I hope this tip was helpful, and we will see you guys in the next video.